Hello, everyone. Hello. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Thursday. I have some great questions from you guys to answer tonight and also some updates. So, how are you all doing? I hope that you've had a wonderful day. Let's see, it was kind of rainy here this morning. We don't get rain very often in Southern California, but it was definitely cold and wet and rainy this morning, and I went to the barn and rode in the rain, which was super fun. I love riding in the rain. The horses were a little bit excited. So I was riding Harvey and I took him up into the arena, and all of the rain and like the tree stuff was falling onto the bleachers next to the arena. And he did not like that. So Harvey does not like the rain. He doesn't like wetness. He doesn't like the wash rack. He doesn't like anything like that, but we worked through it. And I think I was telling one of my students today because her horse was being a little bit difficult riding in the rain today. And I think it's really good to ride your horse sometimes when the conditions aren't perfect, because those are the days that you really win your horse over. Like, I feel like if you can ride them when it's not perfect, in the rain, in the wind, then you know when you go to a show or whatever that you have that bond and that trust with your horse. So rainy days definitely aren't the most perfect or productive days in riding, but I think they're really important days. And I really had a good time riding today at my barn, especially because like no one else came to the barn and rode. And so I really have fun when it's kind of just me there with my horses. And I think I'm kind of an introvert. Sometimes I just want to be alone and ride my horses. I don't know if any of you guys feel that way. All right, let's see. Hi, Linda. Linda's here. Hi, Virginia from North Carolina. Candy, you had freezing rain. Wow, that's bad. Freezing rain in Alberta. Um, 25-mile-an-hour winds. All right. Yeah, it's definitely winter. And I think winter is a really hard time for all of us riders because the days are so short, and yeah, there's just not a lot of time. And I know we had two people. Okay, Holly's saying here, winter in Canada and the snow slides off the arena roof. So I had a few people ask about that, and I know that's a really hard thing, is when, if you live in a snowy environment, when the snow builds up on the roof and then it falls off and the horses get spooked by that. And I think that that's a really challenging thing to work through because it's not predictable. Like, if your horse is just scared of the letter A, then you know, like, as you're coming towards the letter A, that you need to bend your horse and put your horse in a little bit of shoulder in, approaching that letter. What's difficult about the snow falling off the roof is that you have no warning. You're just riding along, and all of a sudden there's this big noise. And that can be a real challenge, especially I feel like some horses are more visually spooky and other horses are more sound spooky. So the best preparation for that, for something that's unexpected like that, I think is, to just really work on having your horse on the aids, having your horse from your inside leg to the outside rein, because the more that your horse is respecting your inside leg, then the less likely they are to kind of spin around or dive to the inside when they hear that sound. Another thing that's really good is to just make sure that your position is correct, that you're sitting back, that your hands are down, that you have that correct alignment from your ear, shoulder, hip, heel, because that correct alignment really is what keeps you stable in the saddle when unexpected things happen. So I hope that helps you guys that have snow on your rooftop. So, what else? Let's see who else is. We have a lot of people watching here today. Oh, yeah. Jennifer says it's summer now down under. Too hot. Um, yeah. So, I'm really looking forward to the days getting longer, and that happens just in a couple of weeks. One thing, let me know in the comments what you guys like about the winter. I always try to stay positive. And so I was thinking today, like when you're driving home and it's so dark already, is what do I actually like about the winter? One thing that I like about the winter is I actually like having a little more time in the evenings, getting home a little earlier, and I like to cook. So that's kind of a funny thing. I really try to eat pretty healthy. I'm like I guess you could say it's like a convenience vegan. So when it's convenient, I like to try to eat vegan. When it's not convenient, like when my husband gets fresh fish or when we're out to dinner, then I don't eat vegan, but when I'm at home, when I'm cooking for myself, I like to eat vegan. So I've been making this really delicious, it's like a pasta casserole that has peas and carrots and celery. It's kind of like chicken pot pie, but it's vegan. And so you make this cashew sauce to go over it, and then you bake it in the oven. So I made some of that the other night, and we have leftovers. But that's one thing that I like about the winter. All right, Doreen says that she loves the snow. Um, Shari says fewer people at the barn in the evenings. Okay, I guess maybe Shari, you're an introvert like me. We like to be alone. What else? Cindy says she likes the rain. So yeah, there's definitely are some good things about the winter, but I'm definitely looking forward to the winter solstice and the days getting longer again. So I am going this weekend. I'm going up to Northern California to do a clinic near Oakland. I think I fly to Oakland. And then as you guys saw, I'm also doing a clinic at Starvon. That's in Northern California near Sacramento in January. So the California Dressage Society actually invited me to do their annual meeting this year, which is like a big deal. So it's kind of a big symposium, and the focus is suppleness through the levels. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's on January 22nd. CDS still doesn't have like a registration page set up, but I will definitely be sure to send that out to everyone on the list. And I'm honored and also a little nervous to be doing that symposium because it's a big deal. They've had some big names like Kira Kirkland and some big people do it before. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's always fun. I enjoy going to clinics and teaching new people because it's a challenge. Like when you see a person every day, you kind of know their issues and you know their horse's issues. But when you see a new person, you have to figure out rather quickly kind of what personality the person is, what personality the horse is, and then what exercises or techniques work for them. Because, some people need a little more like pressure and excitement in a lesson, whereas other people need the lesson to be like a little more calm and giving them confidence and relaxing. So I'm looking forward to the clinic this weekend. I leave tomorrow. And let's see what else. Okay, we have some questions here on YouTube. So Katie says, can you talk about self-carriage? I'm constantly reminding my horse to be on the aids, her head position, and maintaining the bend. Do I ever get to stop as we advance, or are people at Pre St. George still reminding? Okay, so that's a great question. And self carriage is something that you're always working towards. So I think in dressage, in training, you're never done training. So you always are reminding your horse, you always are reprogramming your horse. It's not like your computer. Like once you install a software, your computer has the software on it. Horses aren't like that. So we have to constantly be reinforcing the training all the time. Now, over time, your horses do learn. They have really good memories, and it's amazing what you can teach them. So, over time, they will progress and they will learn, but you're always having to remind them. What is self carriage? So, self carriage is when you can soften your reins, when you can take your legs away, and your horse continues doing what they're doing. when your horse is in self-carriage and you feel like you can just relax and go with the horse, it's really it's an amazing feeling when the horse is using their own muscles to carry themselves as opposed to your muscles. But it's definitely something that, like, even with Harvey, for example, I have moments of it. I have days where he feels like he's really carrying himself and really supple. And then other days that it goes away. And so a couple of things that are really important for self carriage. I think the biggest one is your position. So, in order for your horse to be in self carriage, your position has to be perfect. Like your seat has to be exactly following the motion of your horse. Your aids have to be independent. You have to be able to soften your hand and really stay connected through your core. And I think that's a lot of times what people miss when they're working on self-carriage is they kind of give the rein away at the wrong time, and also they come off of their seat. So you really have to be connected in your seat. You have to also have the feeling of when you soften your reins. You have to know before you soften your reins whether or not your horse is in self-carriage, because if you give it the wrong time and they fall apart, then you have to start over again. So hopefully that helps you. But yeah, Katie, self carriage is something you're always working on. And as you move up the levels, your standard of self carriage gets more and more. So, my standard for self carriage on a training level 4-year-old horse is very different from what I'm looking for in a Grand Prix horse. Okay, let's see. Cindy says tips for engaging my core without looking so stiff. That's a good one. I think that is for sure really hard, is figuring out how to use your core, what muscles to use. I have a lot of videos on YouTube about exactly what muscles you should be using so that you're not gripping or stiff, but more like you're wrapping your horse around. I also have a lot of great exercises in my rider position masterclass, but one of my favorite ones to do that I think really applies to riding is, the bridge, like when you're laying on your back and you just kind of bridge your hips up and then you roll your spine down vertebrae by vertebrae and then you roll up again. I think that's one of the best ones for riding, because that's what you need to do in riding. You have to control your core, but you also need to let your spine move within the control. And so, yeah, I started taking Pilates sessions. And do any of you guys do Pilates or yoga or anything like that? I'm curious, but Pilates has been really interesting to me. There's a lot of similarities with riding because it's all about symmetry and alignment and precision of placement and stretching, which I hate stretching. I absolutely hate stretching, but it's really important for your riding that you do things out of the saddle that complement your symmetry and your straightness and your strength as well as flexibility. So, okay, Donna, you're a yoga instructor. Yes, I need to build up to yoga. That's my goal one day, is to start doing yoga. Let's see, Jacqueline has done Pilates. So yeah, all good stuff. All good stuff. Okay, what else? Oh, so this week's YouTube video was the snowman exercise, and we had some really cool drone footage. Someone on Instagram posted footage of them doing the snowman exercise on the beach, and it was so cool. Like you could see the footprints and the snowman right next to the ocean, and it was really cool. So if you haven't checked out that video, the snowman is seriously one of my favorite exercises. And the story behind the snowman is that I had this horse, Gatsby, and he was a really great horse, a really cool horse. But I went to a clinic with Conrad Schumacher, and Gatsby was terrible at the clinic. He was so tense because my husband's horse was in the pasture, like right behind the arena, galloping around on this gravel. And so Gatsby was like screaming the whole lesson, and he was terrible. It was so embarrassing. But I learned the snowman. So Conrad Schumacher had me do the snowman with him, and just the trot, canter, trot, and the changes of direction. It helped to get him supple. It helped to get him to relax. And then after that clinic, I started doing the snowman with all of my horses and all of my students. And I couldn't believe that it helped every single rider and every single horse that I rode. So it's really a universal exercise. And let me know if you've tried the snowman. If you haven't tried the snowman, you have to try it. Okay. Let's see. Lori has a question. Do you have tips for not leaning forward? My mare is uphill and I'm an ex-jumper. When I lean, it throws her off. Yeah, so leaning forward, especially if you jumped before, I think a lot of it is just reprogramming yourself and changing your proprioception so that you actually know when you're sitting up straight, because you probably are going to feel like you're leaning back when you are in that correct alignment. So some really good things are eyes on the ground. So having someone sit there and be like, okay, there you're sitting back. Okay, now you're tipping forward, so that you kind of start to reprogram your brain for what it actually feels like. And I mean, another good thing is to just, anytime that you are breaking a habit, I think finding ways to remind yourself to sit back or whatever your habit is really helpful. So, for example, putting a reminder on your phone. I've done that before, where I set a reminder on my phone for a time right when I'm about to get on my horse that says, remember to sit back. That's a great one. Another thing you can do is pick a point in the arena, like near the gate or near a letter. Every time you go past that, say, okay, sit back, sit back, sit back. And then just really associating that feeling of when you're sitting back, what it should feel like. Okay. What else? Oh, I wanted to, before we finish tonight, I have some exciting things coming up. So on the 1st of January, well, no, before the 1st of January, starting, I think it's like the 20th of December, we're going to start doing the 12 days of dressage. So we're going to post a new video or a new exercise every day for 12 days. So that's going to be like our gift to you for Christmas. And then after that, on the 1st of January, I'm going to be doing a goal setting workshop. So it's going to be a free webinar. I hope you guys all come. And it's just going to be giving you guys some tips and some strategies to help you plan for 2022, which I can't believe that's already happening. So that's going to be the 1st of January on Saturday. Then the following Sunday, I'm going to do another free webinar on groundwork. So I don't know how I'm going to get all of this done, but my team is hopefully going to help me. So we've got those 2 webinars coming up in January to really get you guys kickstarted for the year ahead. And I'm looking forward to that. So mark your calendars. Okay, what other questions do we have for you guys? Let's see. Anne Marie, how do you determine saddle fit when you don't have a saddle fitter? Okay, this is a good question. I do have a few videos on my YouTube channel about saddle fit. So go to YouTube and search my name and search for saddle fit. A couple things that are really important is that when you just set the saddle on your horse's back, it should just kind of sit on their back. And what I mean by this is, like, if you take your horse and you take 4 or 5 different saddles and just sit them on your horse's back, some of them will just kind of sit into your horse's back and just sit kind of, like a glove or like a nice pair of shoes, and they'll just wrap around your horse's back. Other saddles will look unstable, or you'll kind of see daylight underneath the panels, or they'll just look really rocky. So that's kind of where I start, is I don't put a saddle pad or anything. I just sit the saddle on the horse's back. I try to kind of rock it around, and I just see if it looks like it sits on the horse. That's what I start with. Then When you're riding the horse, a couple of things that are really important. One is that the saddle sits straight. That's probably the most important thing, because if the saddle is going off to one side or the other, then the panel of the saddle is sitting on your horse's spine, and that's incredibly uncomfortable for them. So the saddle has to sit straight. And then you also want the saddle to sit quiet on your horse's back. So if the back of the saddle is like bouncing up and down a lot, then the saddle doesn't fit your horse correctly. So those are the three main things, is just, that it sits straight, that it doesn't bounce, and then that it puts you in the correct position, that you feel comfortable in the saddle. And yeah, if you can have a saddle fitter, that's the best. I'm not a professional saddle fitter, but I know sometimes we just have to make do the best we can. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Monique. I've been having issues with my leg coming up when I squeeze instead of use my calf. I roll my heel in and up, which messes up my whole position. This only happens to the left, with my left leg on the inside. Okay, so that's a good question. And this happens a lot. I think when we don't feel like our horse is reactive to our leg aid, or when we're not strong with one leg, it could be that your left leg is weaker, then we end up kind of curling up and tightening up that leg. So, one thing that is really helpful with that is to think about really like using your leg and then releasing your leg. So, like, really consciously tell yourself, okay, get the horse to react away from my left leg and then push my left heel down, and get the horse to react and then push your left heel down, so that you're fixing your horse and then recalibrating your position. And that's really important, that you recalibrate so that you don't end up compensating in weird ways. And then, yeah, maybe to work on leg strength, like work on strengthening a little bit your left leg so that you can be more effective with it. Okay. Alex says, I'm currently working on a slower tempo and a longer stride in the trot work with my 5-year-old. I have a habit of confusing quick with forward and unintentionally shortening his stride and making his legs too fast. My poor trainer is constantly reminding me longer stride, slower tempo, or sometimes just longer stride. Any tips to help with this? So that's a good question. And one thing that just comes to mind is doing a lot of transitions within the gait. I think is always really helpful when you're trying to work on getting a longer stride. So, like, really bringing the horse back and then sending the horse forward. And when you send the horse forward, really think about not letting the tempo increase. So, not letting it get faster, but just pushing for a bigger stride. Another thing that I would just be curious about is, if you feel a lot of times when we feel like the horse is behind our leg, when we feel like our horse is lazy, then we end up rushing our horse and like kind of just chasing our horse over tempo. Remember that impulsion has to do with suspension. So when we want more impulsion, we want our horse to take a bigger stride. We want to get more air time. We don't want just a quicker step. Another really good exercise whenever I'm trying to work on getting the horse to take a longer stride is suppleness. So, in order to take a longer stride, your horse needs to be supple. Some really good exercises for suppleness are leg yield. So, one of my favorite ways to develop the trot lengthening is to do a leg yield into the trot lengthening. So the leg yield gets your horse's back loose and supple, so that when you ask for the lengthening, you actually get a longer stride rather than a faster stride. So hopefully that helps you, Alex. That's a huge part of dressage, is getting control of stride length while maintaining the same tempo. So if we think about a Grand Prix horse, for example, they can do a piaffe, they can do a collected trot, and they can do an extended trot with more or less the same tempo, but very different stride length. So getting where your horse can trot on the spot or do an extended trot, that really is dressage training. I actually, for those of you guys that are part of the monthly workshops, a few months ago, we focused all on rhythm, tempo, and stride length. So that was a really fun workshop. If you're part of the academy, for sure go back and watch that lecture and check out those exercises. And yes, for those of you guys in the academy, Linda's here. Next week, we are doing our lecture on suppleness and straightness. So I've been working on that presentation. Okay, Cindy has a good question here. Have you ever had a horse who said, "Hey, I don't want to be a dressage horse"? This is a good question. Let me know if you guys have ever had a horse that says, "I don't want to be a dressage horse." So, a couple of things is yes and no. I think that one thing that is really great about dressage is that dressage helps all horses and all disciplines, because the basics of dressage are what you need to enjoy riding your horse. So when we think about like rhythm, suppleness, and connection, pretty much whatever sport you're doing, whether you're jumping or doing trail riding or whatever, we want our horse relaxed. We want our horse to be on the aids. We want our horse listening to us. We want our horse straight. So all of that stuff, I think, applies to any horse. Now, that said, there's definitely some horses that don't want to be a Grand Prix horse. I mean, doing Grand Prix is really hard. And it's really hard physically on horses to compete at that high of a level. It's also really hard emotionally. Like the horse has to want to do it to really get to the FEI levels and to get to the top of dressage. And some horses just don't have that in them. I mean, it's kind of just like people. Like some people are maybe, they're talented and they have a good body, but they're just not that motivated. And so I think that temperament for sure has a big part of how far your horse gets in dressage. And certainly there's some horses that conformationally they can't get to Grand Prix because their body just doesn't do it. But I think that attitude and brain is a huge part of that. There's some horses that just aren't as motivated. But that said, I think that it's definitely something that you can nurture and develop in a horse. And that's why young horses and training young horses correctly is so important, because when I have a 4 or a 5-year-old, like I have a few 5-year-olds right now that I'm training, and one thing that I'm developing with them is just simply work ethic and focus. It's like every day you come out, you have to work, and certainly it's fun and rewarding. And I try to make it all of those things. But part of it is just developing that work ethic and that foundation at a young level so that they're ready in the future to be a dressage horse. It's kind of, it's like the same as with children. You have to instill those values in kids when they're young. If you wait until they're teenagers and then start, teaching them to be responsible and go to school and all that stuff, it doesn't work. So it's the same with the horses. So let's see, Cindy, my first thoroughbred from the track was too hot for dressage and he loved jumping. And yeah, there's some horses that don't like dressage is a lot of discipline and it's a lot of control. And there's definitely some horses, like especially thoroughbreds, that like jumping more or cross country because it's not so controlling and it's not so particular. All right. Let's see. Jennifer, thoughts on a horse who likes to barge or run through the changes in bend? So that's a good question. When we're talking about changes of bend, we're doing serpentines or something like that. Like when you're working on going from left bend to right bend and back to left bend. I love doing serpentines. They're one of my favorite exercises to work on suppleness, which of course is the second rung of the training scale and super important part. A couple of things is if your horse just tends to run through the change of bend, it's probably because they're not supple. So rather than like bending and curving in their body, they're just rushing forward. So what I might recommend is doing your turns a little sharper, like where you're turning a little steeper and maybe going like all the way where you're turning up the center line and then turning the other way. So you're kind of making like a ribbon candy serpentine and you're really challenging that bend so that you don't have any straight steps. Like you're basically going from a steep right bend right into a steep left bend. And if your horse tries to rush, then just turn and bend even steeper until they slow down. Because if you keep turning your horse sharper, at some point they have to slow down. When I used to work for a guy in Colorado and we had cattle and we would go out to the pasture to move the cattle, we would do that around sagebrush. So we would just make like tiny figure eights and serpentines around the sagebrush to get our horse to relax and get supple and kind of get with us before we had to actually like go move pastures. So I would just keep making those turns a little tighter, keep repeating it. The other thing that you really want to think about is that when you ask your horse to move off your inside leg for bend, that you don't want your horse to speed up. So like when you put your inside leg on, you want your horse to move over, but not get faster. And that's just going to be a little bit retraining your horse that your leg doesn't always mean to run away, but your leg might mean to go sideways. Okay, Donna says that she got her training scale container. Yay, awesome. Yeah. So these water bottles, for those of you guys that signed up for a Black Friday course, hopefully you should be getting them. Joel sent them all out. So hopefully the mail service will cooperate and you'll get your training scale water bottles soon. All right, a couple more questions and then time for dinner. Let's see. Edie says, I need help with correct outside leg placement for lateral movements versus bending. Lately, I'm getting lateral movement from my horse when asking for bending, especially if he is nervous, so it's possibly an evasion. Okay, so Edie, I'm not sure exactly what she means, but when you let's see. So when you're bending, like whenever you're making a circle to the left, your inside leg should be at the girth and your outside leg should be behind the girth. And your outside leg is there to prevent the haunches from falling out so that when you make a circle to the left, that you actually get your horse to bend in the body. And one thing that I think has been really cool with the drone footage that I've been doing lately is that you can actually see from when you look at a horse from above, you can see that a horse can bend in their body, which I wasn't always convinced of when I was first learning to ride dressage. Like I was like, really? Like, can a horse really bend in the rib cage? But now that I see it and can feel it, I do believe it. But your outside leg is really important so that your horse doesn't fall to the outside with their outside hip. Now, that said, it sounds like with Edie, maybe her horse is moving too much in from the outside leg. So if your horse is going in haunches in and you don't want them to, then you need to a little bit release the pressure of the outside leg. So still keep your outside leg behind the girth, but don't have it clamped on so much. And then think about moving your horse off of the inside leg. So adding a little inside leg pressure. I always think of it as that if your legs are like your legs create a tunnel around your horse. And if your horse is going in the middle of the tunnel, then they shouldn't have a lot of pressure from your legs. But if your horse if their hips slide out, then they should run into your outside leg. If they fall in, then they should run into your inside leg. So just kind of have that image of your legs wrapping around your horse, creating this tunnel that's guiding your horse's body, whether it's on a curved line or a straight line or whatever. If your horse falls in, they run into the tunnel on the inside. If your horse falls out, they run into the tunnel on the outside. And otherwise, they're just staying in the middle of the tunnel. So hopefully that helps you. And that's it. Thank you guys for being here. We have a lot of people here tonight. I think we have 70 on Facebook and 30 on YouTube. So that's awesome. Thank you guys all so much. And I hope that you have a wonderful evening. I'll be here next Thursday. For those of you guys in the academy, we have our lectures coming up next week already. And yeah, thank you guys all. For those of you guys who filled out the survey, also, thank you for taking the time to do that. We're really dedicated to making you guys awesome dressage educational content. I love hearing from all of you guys on Facebook and on YouTube, and just hearing about your successes with your horse and how much you love and enjoy learning and love your horses. And yeah, it's really fun. It's an amazing community that we have. And I appreciate all of you. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening. And hopefully I will see you here next week. Bye, everyone.